If you have ever wondered why it is so hard to talk about your trauma, or sometimes just feels impossible to talk about your trauma, I'm going to tell you 3 reasons why that is. The first one is literally physiological, and the body keeps a score. They did a study where they had people who had gone through trauma, they wrote out their trauma story, and then while their brains were being imaged, they were read this story and it triggered flashbacks. And as these flashbacks were happening, the amygdala was very activated and lit up, which makes sense because the amygdala is responsible for fear. But what was most interesting in this study is that they found that the Broca's area, this other part of your brain, showed a marked decrease in activity. And the Broca's area is responsible for speech and for putting your experiences into words. Interesting. Okay. And it was a very noticeable shutdown in this Broca's area. It looked very similar to people who have undergone a stroke that disrupts their language. So basically, the part of the brain that literally does language goes offline during flashbacks, during experiences where a past trauma is being retold. These speech producing neural circuits are just not available. So yeah, it's going to be hard to talk about trauma when the part of your brain that you need for that isn't available. It's not lighting up, it's not working. So that's just like, okay, there's no arguing with that. People aren't just finding it hard to talk about their trauma. There is measurably reduced activity in the area of the brain that they need to talk about their trauma. So that's the first reason. I've got 2 more for you. The second one is that trauma is not just a memory that you're recounting. It's not just a memory that you hold up in your brain. It is a felt memory. So when you start to retell this memory, there's going to be some activation that comes with it. So even if you are able to, tap in and access this Broca's area of the brain, and you're trying to talk about your trauma, talk about your past experience, your body does not understand that you are talking about an experience that happened in the past. Your body thinks, okay, it's happening again. And you might have noticed this in yourself if you have tried to talk about your trauma, and now all of a sudden your heart rate starts to pick up. Or maybe your body temperature elevates, your hands get clammy, your breath gets a little quicker. Maybe you feel tension in your body, you feel your muscles start to tighten up. That's because you are literally reactivating your nervous system, and this can be re-traumatizing. A lot of people go into therapy and are asked to talk about their trauma in the name of processing it. But I would argue that this is not processing, this is just re-traumatizing. And that doesn't mean you can't talk about your trauma and that you should never talk about it. No, it means you should only talk about your trauma when you are very regulated or being co-regulated with someone else who has a strong regulated nervous system and can keep you grounded and can keep you present here and not let you get pulled back into the tyranny of the past, as Peter Levine says. You can talk about your trauma if you are being supported as you do so, and if you feel safe enough to do so. I also think it's really important here to titrate. Titration is key in processing trauma. You should never be diving headfirst into your trauma and just facing it head on. Again, that's going to be re-traumatizing. But what you can do is start to talk about it. Notice what is happening in my body as I talk about this. Am I getting really activated? Yes? Okay, I'm going to step out of this now. I'm going to co-regulate. I'm going to talk about something else. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to have someone hold my hand. I'm going to hold a teddy bear or pet a dog. That is titration. It's going into it, but having tools available around you so that you can pull yourself out of it. If you do not titrate, if you are not regulated or co-regulated, if there is no safety, if there is no internal regulation, it is not a good time to start talking about your trauma. So if you are seeking therapy to work through and process trauma, focus on building a therapeutic relationship with your therapist, one where you feel really safe, one where you feel supported, one where you know that if you do start to go into a past traumatic experience and you start to get dysregulated, that your therapist can co-regulate with you, or that you have another tool that can help pull you back to the present. Trauma wants to pull you out of the present. Trauma literally robs you of the present and forces your body to live in the past and relive over and over and over again. And that doesn't mean you have to stay stuck in the past. It means you need to do processing in a safe way, in a way where you're not just reliving over and over again. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please ask questions and I will clarify. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes the most trauma-informed thing you can do is not talk about it. That doesn't mean forever, but if you are going to talk about it and you know it's going to reactivate your body and essentially convince your body that you're reliving the trauma again, that's not trauma-informed, that's not healthy, that's not processing. So just take that into consideration. Take your mind state into consideration, take your environment into consideration, take the people around you into consideration, and then make an informed decision whether now is a good time to talk about this trauma or maybe it's not, and that's okay. You do not have to talk about your trauma to heal from trauma. You do not have to talk about your trauma over and over again to recover from that trauma. Which brings me to the third reason why it's so hard to talk about trauma is that sometimes there just are no words. And maybe you've experienced this too, where you're like, okay, I feel like I'm ready to talk about this. I'm ready to work through this. And you go to therapy or you go to a friend or someone you trust and you start to try to talk about it, but you're really struggling to just find the words for it. Maybe this is because there never were words and this trauma happened when you were a child and the language just wasn't there, it wasn't developed enough. So that could be one reason why there are no words. But also there might be no words just because there are no right words. No words that would actually do your story justice or provide you with any sort of actual relief. No words that are actually helpful. And I feel like that kind of sounds depressing. Like, yeah, sometimes there just are no words. That's not like a dead end though. That doesn't mean, just because there are no words, it doesn't mean that you're doomed and that you can't process and recover from this trauma. But maybe you just need to process and recover in a different way. And this is where it's a really beautiful thing, where we can now turn our attention to the body. Maybe it's sound, maybe it's rhythm, maybe it's orienting, maybe it's breath work, maybe it's grounding, maybe it's just not talking and turning to the body and addressing what is stored up here. What are you carrying here? A lot of times we can see the ways in which people are holding on to trauma just by their posture. My posture drastically changed over a period of my life where my shoulders started to hunch in and my heart started to kind of collapse backwards. And do you see how that's a posture of protection? Yeah, I was literally a walking embodiment of this trauma I was carrying, of trying to fold in, get smaller, and protect myself. Other times, people's posture might change in the complete opposite direction. They might get bigger. They might stand taller, as if to present as more aggressive or stronger. Again, that's a protection mechanism. So also noticing these holding patterns that you have and working with those. There are so many ways you can work with the body, but please do so safely. Do so with support. Do so with co-regulation. Do so with someone that you trust. And don't get hard on yourself if you can't talk about your trauma or you just don't want to. That's okay. There are many other ways you can sort through the experiences that you've had and get to the other side of it. And you can do it with talking. You can do it without talking. Okay? So don't be hard on yourself. There's a literal physiological reason that can be pointed to in your brain on why you can't talk about your trauma. It can be reactivating and re-traumatizing to talk about your trauma, and sometimes there are just no words. But I get it, it can be frustrating, so be gentle with yourself.